Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Radio Entrepreneurs. My name is Jeffrey Davis, and as we're in the fall of 24, we're continuing to stream stories of leadership, entrepreneurship, how people are dealing with the economy. Most important in today's world, all entrepreneurs have to be informed of the law, have good legal counsel, and that's why every week we like to check in with Mark Furman, Director, Shareholder at Tarlow, Breed, Hart, and Rodgers for entrepreneurship and the law. Welcome back, Mark.
Hey, Jeffrey, great to see you.
Nice to see you too, Mark. What's on our docket today? Du jour.
Well, I just wanted to talk about how, legal documents are not something that you execute, sign up, and then put in a drawer, forget about, and 5, 10, 15, 20 years later, never update. Because circumstances change. You have, let's say, in the estate planning area, business owners, like everybody else, need to have an estate plan, and circumstances do change in people's lives. How about divorces, for example? Uh, uh, Children with disabilities, spouses who have issues, health issues. Law changes, particularly with regard to taxes, for example, and it's so you need to periodically update legal documents to make sure that they fit. You have an elaborate plan for business, maybe it's a family business, and then the circumstances change in the business, and your thinking would change about what you would want to have happen and what you make sense to have happen in terms of tax planning, family planning, business planning. I'll give you another example. In business owners, we've talked about situations where there's really no agreement among the business owners that's in writing, or it's almost a back of the envelope agreement, which certainly focuses on everything that's good that could happen, but seldom focuses on what happens if disputes arise, if there is trouble in paradise in terms of the relationship between the co-owners. Which may be family members, which add a whole nother layer to it. And, there are agreements. I'll just give one example. There are many agreements that will say, well, if somebody dies, becomes disabled, retires, resigns, they get the fair value of their ownership interest. And it'll say that is to be determined every 1 year, every 2 years, every 3 years. And so everybody goes through the trouble of having this shareholder agreement or operating agreement signed. It has a term like that, and they arrive at a price, a value, and then they're dealing with the day-to-day, which is business growth, business survival, survive. And the next thing you know, it's 5 years later, 10 years later, 20 years later, and you have this valuation when the company did $1 million of business, and now you have a company that's doing $50 million of business, and something happens. So people need to think of updating legal documents as a regular part of their business, just like you need to have ongoing insurance thought about. You got to keep up to date on laws that relate to employees and paying of wages and discrimination laws. You also need to make sure that you have a ownership agreement that makes sense based upon the circumstances that now exist, not the circumstances that existed when the company was a startup or very small. And what happens if you actually take out the agreement, say we need to update the value, but partner A says, oh, I think that's still the fair value. And partner B says, that is less than 10% of the fair value. What do you do? How do you resolve that dispute? So it's better to make sure agreements. I'm not a fan of that kind of clause, by the way, that requires updates, because human nature is a little bit about put the signed agreement in the drawer and forget about it, and then it's never on your to-do list for a particular day or week. It always gets pushed off. But I am not a fan of that kind of thing that requires parties to agree to the update, as opposed to having a more objective process determine what the value is at various times. So those are just a couple of examples why legal documents are not forever.
Well, families and attorneys, or lack of attorneys, have helped to keep me busy as a consultant for a long time. So I've appreciated sometimes flawed documents, but also I'd have to tell you, I've appreciated more the good documents, because it's given me my roadmap for helping healthy families. But I think part of the problem is marriage. People have this concept in marriage of death, till death do you part. And when they enter a partnership and they're all excited, they think till death do you part. They don't really understand you have to be deciding the ending as you start, because it is a business arrangement. And I think in families in business, they think until death do you part, and that you're going to inherit all your family members. And that can be more deadly than business partners. And if you don't have a methodology for dealing with conflicts, issues, compensation, decision-making, spouses, then you're just asking to destroy the value that a family could have built over 1, 2, 3, 4, or more generations.
Absolutely right, Jeffrey. Entrepreneurs are an optimistic group of people, and so they're laser focused on the opportunity, but they're not frequently as focused on what happens if things don't work out.
And it happens to the best of people. It happens in most organizations. As you know, I once had to fire a partner, and I was lucky enough that a senior partner with a little bit of a receding hairline at Tarlow, Hart Rodgers wrote my partnership agreement, which enabled me to easily extract a partner that wasn't doing their job. And that's the key. If I couldn't have done that, I could have lost my whole business.
Yeah, I mean, you just can't overstate the importance of making sure that documents are not forgotten about, and that they're updated as the business develops. Make sure that it still makes sense, because if a conflict arises, you don't want to be resolving the conflict based upon 20-year-old documents. You want to be resolving it based upon where the business is as close to that moment in time as possible. And it's just, I liken it to insurance. It's different, obviously, but for most business owners, their ownership of their business is the single most valuable asset that they have. And co-owner conflict can destroy the value that people have worked so hard to build. And if there are mechanisms and approaches to preserving value, and I know that's one of the things you work on, Jeffrey, is trying to preserve the value of the business when there are issues among the owners of the business. That's the prize, right? The value of the
That's
business.
the cash cow.
That's what supports families, and you don't want to be dealing with situations based upon terribly outdated documents. So
most families, the most valuable asset they own is their business, if they own a business. And, they would never run their house that way without insurance and protections and things like that. So why would they not run their business with the proper protections? That's the key. And it's both legal and insurance. You're right. You cannot run a business and protect an asset unless you have the proper legal structures. And it's up to the individual to design, to make that happen with the right counsel.
Well, so I mean that's the message that I wanted to talk about today. It's really that simple. Just make sure, just like your inventory is up to date, make sure your legal documents are as well.
Mark, always a great subject. We love this segment, Entrepreneurship and the Law. If someone's looking for you, Tarlow, Reed, Hart, and Rodgers, how would they find you?
I can best be reached by email. It's Furman, Furman, at TBHR-LAW.com.
Great, Mark. And we look forward to seeing you again next week on Radio Entrepreneurs.